Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to exercise my prerogative as chair and postpone the official start of our meeting because what we have done this morning is we have reduced the average age of our audience but increased the average intellectual power of our audience. We have special guests, and they are with the Know How to Go Wisconsin program, and I would like to invite President Riley to introduce them.
Thank you. Thank you, President Bradley. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. We did want to start off by sharing some good news, which is a commodity we could all use a little more of these days. We are pleased to have with us this morning some very special guests, 6 creative, ambitious young folks who are winners of the first ever Know How to Go Wisconsin EdVest Studio or Student Video Contest. Back in October, Know How to Go Wisconsin partnered with EdVest to launch a video contest in honor of Higher Education Day. Students across the state were invited to create videos dramatizing one of the Know How to Go Wisconsin 4 steps to college. And let me remind you what those steps are. Number 1, be a pain. That is, let everyone know you're going to college and you need their help. Number 2, push yourself. Take the tough classes that will prepare you for success in college. Number 3, find the right fit. Know about the campuses you're considering and whether they're the kinds of environments that you'll thrive in. And number 4, put your hands on some cash, remembering that there's lots of financial aid out there and ways for families to save. So more than 70 students from 22 communities submitted videos, providing guest judge Gary Mills, who's an executive producer with Wisconsin Public Television, with a very tough job. Fortunately, Gary had some help with the judging from UW Systems' Molly Dillman and Megan Perkins from the Office of the State Treasurer. Today, with all of the Know How to Go Wisconsin partners, we have the privilege of unveiling the winning video. So this is kind of like, you know, the Cannes Film Festival here, the Cannes Film Festival, and honoring these students for their outstanding creativity. I'd like to thank all of the Wisconsin Know How to Go partners, including the Wisconsin Technical College System, the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, the Department of Public Instruction, and the Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation for continuing to be a unifying force for Wisconsin's youth. And I'd like you to join me, if you would, in welcoming representatives from those organizations. President Dan Clancy of the WTCS is with us this morning. Brooke Konopacki of the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges. I think Amy Kerwin from Great Lakes. Amy, are you over there? Regent Burmaster, I should introduce, is the DPI partner as well. This really has been a partnership effort, and we would not have gotten to where we are today without a very good, unselfish work on the part of all partners. And we're especially pleased to have here today our EdVest partners as well. So I want now to welcome State Treasurer Don Sass, who will introduce the winners and present them with their EdVest scholarships. Don, it's great to have you with us.
Good morning, and thank you, President Riley. Although Cannes probably has better weather than we do today.
Probably.
3 years ago, the Office of the State Treasurer created Higher Education Day in order to focus attention on the importance of higher education and to highlight the many excellent resources already available to our state students and their parents. Over the years, Higher Education Day has grown and evolved. Higher Education Day could not be possible without the partnership of the UW system, the technical schools, and the private colleges. This year, we had over 25 events in over 12 cities across the state that included financial aid seminars, admissions open houses, and school visits. In addition, we launched the innovative contest for 7th through 10th graders with Know How to Go Wisconsin. Our office really enjoyed the partnership, and we look forward to working together in the future on other projects. Know How to Go and EdVest are a great team because they have the same message. Let's get kids to college. It's wonderful that students from all over the state entered this contest and really took time to think about the steps that they would need in order to make their college in their future. EdVest is one of the great things about my job that helps me get to meet students, parents, and teachers and let them know that it's never too late or too early to start saving for your child's future for college with EdVest, Wisconsin's official college savings plan. EdVest is great for Wisconsinites because it offers a safe, flexible way to save for college with lots of benefits. The money can be used to pay tuition, books, and even college housing expenses at any college a child chooses to attend, be it one of the excellent Wisconsin public, private, or technical schools, or schools in another state. With EdVest College Savings, that money that parents save today will help their children access their dreams tomorrow. With this being said, it is my pleasure to present the EdVest scholarship accounts to all of our winners. I will start with our third place winning team. This video was created by Shyla Cummings, Leah Harvey, and Emma Harvey from Endeavor, Wisconsin. Let's watch their fantastic video.
It's my perfect fit. Congratulations. Thanks. Are you home? Yeah, but where are we? College Coast. Finder fit. Maybe we'll find yours. Sooner baby coats? I sell them. Let's find one that fits you. Oxford University is overseas. Yale. How about a little bit too small? Yeah. Stanford? Oh, expensive. Harvard. My sister goes there. This one I know will first fit. University of Alaska. It's too big. There's no book here. No, there is one out there. Here we go. University of Wisconsin Madison. It's the perfect color. It's so cool. And the perfect fit.
Shia, Leah, and Emma, please come up and join me at the podium. I am pleased to present each of you with the $500 EdVest Award.
Okay, you guys.
Now let's take a look at the second place video created by sisters Nicole and Megan Gauvin from Beloit.
You can't hit the snooze button on your future. Come down to breakfast. Your father has some college brochures for you.
I don't understand why I have to start looking at colleges now. I'm too young.
You're never too young. Today we're going to visit these colleges, try them out for size, and find the one that's just the right fit for you.
Like shoe shopping.
Shoes?
No, colleges. Now eat up. We got to get going. Wisconsin has 20 colleges teeming with opportunities for young people like yourself. Don't settle for just anything. Find the one that's just the right fit for you.
And that's why we're looking at all these colleges, too. Oh,
Hey, there's my old alma mater. You got me big.
I don't want to go to your alma mater.
what was that?
Nothing. Kind of big, though.
And we'll keep looking. Next up is your mother's old alma mater.
UW is small.
Yeah, that was too small.
Okay.
Hey, what's that one?
I don't know. It looks like it's,
Just right.
Nicole and Megan, please come up and join me at the podium. I'd like to present you with the $500 EdVest Scholarship Award check. And now it is my distinct honor to present the grand prize video in this year's Higher Education Video Contest to Alexander Sy from Brookfield. Let's watch his video.
To college for education. Don't you worry about tuition. You get the money
congratulate all of our winners. You see we have some great upcoming future college students here. And I'd like to thank President Riley and the Board of Regents for allowing us to intrude on your meeting today and letting us give this presentation.
No intrusion whatsoever. That's what we're all about here, Dawn. Thank you for coming. I want to, again, congratulate the winners. Yeah. Sure. And I want to congratulate the parents and families of the winners who are here, too.
Right.
You thought they were doing bad things with that video equipment, didn't you?
Okay, you guys kind of move over a little farther. All right, yeah, squish together. Everybody squish together. Say cash.
Yeah.
All right, well, now back to our regular broadcasting schedule, and we'll turn it back over to our genial host, President Mark Bradley. President Bradley.
Thank you, President Riley. I mean, those were just excellent. And, of course, we all know how serious the business of planning for college is. And, that is something that President Obama is speaking about all the time, something that Governor Doyle and Mrs. Doyle are talking about all the time. And I think if President Obama saw this, he would gather up those students and just take them with him on the road to make the case. That was just excellent. So now I'd call the meeting to order and ask the Secretary to please call the roll.
Regent Bartel.
Here.
Regent Bradley.
Here.
Regent Burnasser.
Here.
Regent Schuster. Regent Frank.
Here.
Regent Keith.
Here.
Regent Davis.
Here.
Regent Drew.
Here.
Regent Bravo.
Here.
Regent Rockford.
Here.
Regent Ostenar.
Here.
Regent Lewis.
Here.
Regent Smith.
Here.
Regent Becker. Regent Allen. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh. Regent Womack. A quorum is present.
Good, thank you. We have the minutes of our December 4th and 5th meetings and also our January 16 meetings. They've been distributed to you. Are there any additions or corrections, or may I have a motion for their approval? The second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The written report of the Wisconsin Technical College System has been provided to you. Are there any questions or comments on that report? The regents on that board are Regents Keene, Burmaster, Smith, and Vasquez. We have an invited guest this morning, whom I will introduce when he arrives. But before that, let me just make a couple of comments. First of all, on our ongoing efforts for our communications at the state capitol. Last month, President Riley and Regent Drew met with Assembly Speaker Mike Sheridan, and Regent Falbo also met with Representative Nass. Looking ahead, in a week or so, President Riley will be getting together with Senator Kathleen Vinehout, who is the chair of the Senate's Agriculture and Higher Education Committee. And Kevin and I met once before, in an introductory meeting, and then Kevin is also going to be following up in a meeting with Representative Kim Hickson, who is the chair of the Assembly Committee on Colleges and Universities. Our Crackerjack UW staff is also scheduling meetings with all the new legislators at the Capitol, as well as all members of the Senate Ag and Higher Education Committee, and also the Assembly Colleges and Universities Committee. Representative Hickson, by the way, has offered to host an informational hearing on February 18th to showcase the UW system's contributions to the Wisconsin economy. And in addition to testimony from President Riley, we expect to hear from several people from the UW system from across the state, and we look forward to a good discussion on the economic value that our system brings to Wisconsin. We're also carrying our message to other forums. On January 22nd, President Riley made a presentation that he referred to yesterday to the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce Board of Directors in Pewaukee. There he emphasized that the growth agenda is more than just a set of UW budget initiatives. It's also our long-term vision of where we want the entire state to be. And as we heard in Senior Vice President Martin's presentation yesterday, that's an important message that we all need to reinforce. And the vision isn't just our vision. It's one that's been developed, as you know, through conversations with business leaders, regional economic development entities, chambers of commerce, mayors, county board chairs, and others who are engaged by our local campuses to develop and implement these ideas. As we are keenly aware, the 2009-2011 biennial state budget is not yet assembled. We don't know exactly what is going to be proposed for the UW system. That's going to change in the very near future, and then I think we'll probably have a lot to talk about. But looking ahead to our next meeting, that is one of our one-day sessions, and that's going to be held here in Madison. And I just wanted to mention what we're planning on for the agenda. Much of the morning of that March meeting, I expect, is going to be devoted to budget-related discussions. By then, we should have some real numbers to look at rather than just our speculation. And in the afternoon, we will have an opportunity to spend some time for an in-depth look at diversity and inclusive excellence. Our previous issue-related meetings, I think, have generated some very fruitful discussions, and I think that our March meeting will probably do the same. You received information on something that is an historical first for our board, and that is our digitized collection of Board of Regents meetings. These are now accessible to everyone who wants to look at them. The staff of the UW Digital Collections has successfully launched this Board of Regents digital collection. It spans the board minutes from 1921 to 1991. And to give you some perspective, in that time, the University of Wisconsin, as an entity, went from a single four-year campus in Madison with about 7,300 students to the statewide system it is today with 26 campuses annually serving more than 173,000 students and over 1 million state residents through UW Extension. This digitized collection includes more than 56,000 pages of meeting minutes, materials, and photos from 70 years worth of board meetings. Each page is searchable by keyword. The collection can be accessed through a link on our Board of Regents website. And we are going to be keeping track of how many hits that gets. But seriously, on behalf of the board, this is just a major undertaking, and as you know, throughout the history of the UW system, and before that, the University of Wisconsin, and then also the former state university system, researchers have looked at the evolution of higher education policy in the state, and not researchers just from Wisconsin. researchers from around the world looking at major systems and looking at what I would call the higher performing states in terms of higher education pay a lot of attention to what has gone on and is going on in the state of Wisconsin. So I'd like to thank Kenneth Fraser, who is the director of UW-Madison's libraries, also the staff of the UW Digital Collections, and also the board's Secretary's Office and the Office of General Counsel for their leadership in making this ambitious project a reality. On behalf of all of us, we appreciate the diligence and dedication it took to scan all this information and summarize the significant portion of our institutional history to make it accessible on the internet. We have unfortunately lost, speaking of the history of the board, we have lost recently 2 members of the Board of Regents, and I'd like to recognize those 2 individuals now. On January 2nd, Burt McNamara, a former member of the board who also served as president from 1975 to 1977, died in Milwaukee. Burt was 95 years old. He was an art student who went on to become a steel worker during the Great Depression and a labor leader. He also served on arts boards, including the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. On retiring, Burt found his way back to the classroom. He taught industrial relations here at UW-Milwaukee, and he also went back to art school and actually had one of his paintings in a group showing as recently as a year ago. If we could all be having that kind of success at age 94, I think we would all feel pretty fortunate. According to Burt's grandson, Ben Shikoda, Burt remained active and engaged right up to the end. He was known for walking 2 to 3 miles a day and for having a passion for completing crossword puzzles. And about a year ago, he attended a history class at UW-Milwaukee. A professor recognized Burt in the crowd and asked him to talk about Joe McCarthy and what it was like to be a member in labor during the McCarthy era. Burt didn't know he was going to be called on, and unfazed, he just took the challenge and apparently, according to his grandson, delivered an impromptu talk and regaled everybody about what it was like to be a labor leader in the McCarthy era. His grandson said that Burt was very proud of the UW system and how it reflected on our state. So on behalf of the Board of Regents, I would like to pass our condolences to the McNamara family at the death of Burt, and also our appreciation and our respect for his services to the university system and also to the state. And we learned earlier this week of the death of another former member of the board, and that is Al DeSimone, a prominent Kenosha businessman and a longtime promoter of the university. He died at age 90. So far the statistics are in the favor of having had board service. Judy and I were getting a little worried.
Speak for yourself.
Al is often credited as being one of the founders of UW Parkside. He later served a 6-year term with us on the Board of Regents. His term was from 1995 to 2002. Regent Falbo was a close personal friend of former Regent DeSimone, and I would like to call upon Regent Falbo to share with us some comments about his life.
I know most of the people knew Al, and there might be more in this room that don't know him than I don't realize. I'd like to just talk about him a little bit, just for a couple of minutes. He helped so many people, and he had 2 main passions: the university system, education, and the city of Kenosha, where he was born. Al and my dad started what's called Holy Rosary Sports Night in Kenosha in the early 50s. That will be coming up this Sunday. It's still going. It was to honor Italian athletes. I know what you're thinking, but yes. As we started running out of athletes, Al would bring every year, and to this year too, people from UW Athletics. So that became part of the tradition. wasn't too many Italian athletes left, so we expanded the horizon. It became much more inclusive. I actually remember with my dad and Al sometime in the early 50s meeting Rocky Marciano, who I think was the first honoree, and I remember as a 4 or 5-year-old boy shaking hands with this guy, and it seemed to me at that time he had hands this big. Al also decided that he wanted me to succeed him as in his seat, to replace him as a regent. Neither one of us kind of knew the twists and turns that it was going to end up taking, but I credit Al for a lot of support on that. He wanted me to represent Parkside as he did, and to represent Kenosha. And I said, Al, I haven't lived in Kenosha for 35 years. He said, that's okay, you're still a Kenosha. You will represent us. He called me a few years ago and said he wanted me to have the table that he had had for over 50 years at Holy Rosary Sports Night. And then I had to promise him that I would keep it. He then asked what address they should mail the bill to. And the next year he called me for 2 tickets. Of course he got them. He was just a great guy, and for those of you who knew him, you knew that he would help anybody, anytime, in any way. Al was probably the tallest man I ever met. And all I can say is, God bless you, Al. Go easy on the leadership up there.
Good. Thank you, Regent Falbo.
Could I just add a personal note? After I got this job and Al was off the board, he'd call me every once in a while to give me some advice, or ask me when I was going to pay for the tickets for Holy Rosary Sports Night. And he'd call, and Rita would answer, and he'd say, "Hello, Rita, this is Al Needs-a-Bone. Do you remember me?" And Rita would say, "As soon as I heard the first syllable out of your mouth, I remember. You don't need to tell me your name." So I think anybody who ever worked with Al will remember him, and certainly in the university will remember all his contributions to University of Wisconsin. And so to his wonderful wife, Bernie, and his whole family, I send my own personal condolences.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Kevin. Now, to our special guest, I'm delighted to introduce. Last week, many of you may have seen this report, and we gave you your own copy. And this is a report from the Wisconsin Technology Council, the economic value of academic research and development in Wisconsin. In this report, our guest, Tom Still, who's the president of the Wisconsin Technology Council, reminds us what a major role academic research and development plays in this state. It's a $1.1 billion effort, creating 36 direct and indirect jobs for every $1 million in research and development spending. And as Tom points out on page 2 of his report, if the jobs created by academic research spending in Wisconsin were reported as a separate category within the labor market statistics of the State Department of Workforce Development, it would represent a significant sector in its own right. We're very fortunate this morning to have the author of this report, Tom Still, join us here to talk more about the report and the significant role that all of our universities, not just our doctoral campuses, play in this 21st century knowledge economy. Tom, would you take the floor, please?
Well, thank you very much, President Brandon. Well, good to see everyone. President Riley, thank you so much for part of the invitation. Good to see all the familiar faces here. Well, really, you captured a good piece of what this report is about here today, but what I want to do, I think, is urge this group to think about market share, both retaining your market share in terms of academic R&D and perhaps capturing some more, because that's where this state is poised to go. And so we can talk about that a little bit. Is this okay? Very good. So again, it starts with a pretty big number. About $1.1 billion. You can slice it a couple of different ways. 841 is right here on this campus. See, Chancellor Martin's here today. Another $172 million in private academic institutions. We'll break that down. $54 million around the rest of the system, which is a number that appears to be growing right now, and I think it's important to nurture that. Beyond that 1.067 that you saw, 72 million just right here in non-science and engineering research. The previous numbers were all science and engineering research as defined by the National Science Foundation. Another 42 million that really is science and engineering research, but it's done at institutions that don't grant degrees, so the National Science Foundation doesn't count it the way that they count some of the other figures. Even though, obviously, researchers at Marshfield Clinic and the Blood Center of Wisconsin work shoulder to shoulder with researchers who are at degree-granting institutions. So it's a pretty thin distinction from where we sit. So the bottom line there is about 1.15 billion. So we say 1.1, and then there's several ways to count it, but we know that we're pretty good in there. We're 13th among the states, even if you just use those NFF figures. This shows you where UW-Madison is among the top 10. Just barely $2 million, in fact, behind UC San Francisco in that reporting year. Well behind Johns Hopkins, but frankly we may always be because of the percentage of basically defense-related spending that goes on there. But you can see that we remain in a very competitive position, but there are many institutions that are really kind of right on our heels. It is really closely clustered, especially kind of 2 through 9 in those standings. UW-Madison's number 1 in non-science and engineering research. Now this actually surprised me a little bit. I hadn't looked at this figure in a while, but this is basically research in education, business, and the humanities. And there we actually have these are smaller numbers, but a fairly sizable lead. But that was an interesting piece for me. Sources. Federal government is by far and away the largest, but really those last 2 columns are basically private sources and institutional funds, and there's an industry column there too. One of the smallest, and this often surprises, I think, members of the general public, is that really state dollars into this kind of research, they're not all that significant. And so if it's a perception issue that I think you probably grapple with on a regular basis. There's some really serious clustering at the top. 10 states there, the top 10 account for 57% of all academic R&D. Now, and you can pretty easily figure out why that would be. California, in terms of the number of research institutions they have there, states like Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, they have a number of institutions that fall in that category. We're at 2.16%, which is above our sort of percentage of the economy and population, those other kinds of metrics. So we do better, relatively speaking, than most states. In fact, quite a bit better. That's why we're 13th per capita. But there are 39 states that are almost left out. There are many states that if I were living there, I'd be somewhat fearful about building that innovation economy in terms of the kinds of platforms that they have. We fortunately have that platform. It is already an above average platform, an excellent platform. But some places, this is where we get into market share. Mike?
Tom, I just clarify, that's where there are state contributions? Is that what this graph is?
This graph is all academic R&D spending. So that 1.1 billion roughly, this shows how the pie is nationally in terms of where those other states are, relatively speaking. One of the things we emphasize in the report is the importance of the Bayh-Dole Act going back to 1980 and how that's really been a driver of innovation on campuses ever since. One of the interesting things we found out, a reminder, I guess, is, and Senator Bayh was actually here not too long ago to talk about this, was the really small number of patents that came off of university campuses anywhere up through about the early 80s. And they realized that they were, this untapped source was there. Bayh-Dole really helped unlock that. So it's been an important piece of legislation in place now for nearly 30 years, and it's helped drive innovation. One of the things we set out to do in this report was really focus on one of the more untold stories, at least from where we sit, and that's what's going on around the rest of the system. We know that UW-Madison is a national leader, and in fact a world leader in this kind of research. It's just tough to find a university that is this comprehensive. But there are pockets of research that are emerging around the state that we think are very important. 54 million is the figure. Lion's share of that is at UW-Milwaukee. I see Chancellor Santiago's here today. But there are centers of excellence emerging in 11 other campuses, and everything from life sciences to material science, nano, biofuels. We tried to, in this report, we called out examples of that campus by campus. And one of the things that struck me is there's not that much overlap. As you move ahead, you may want to build on that in terms of finding ways to almost declare centers of excellence, if I'll just use that term, around different sectors in the state, because I think you can find that at different campuses. So that was an important piece from where we sat. We think that more could be done if professors had release time. One of the things we did in this report was actually feature sort of a profile on Eric Singsauce, who's a professor of biology at UW-Stevens Point. Eric has done a lot of work around biofuels, and especially, I think, in terms of bacteria that can be used to help speed that process and make it more economical using non-food plants. Eric has done a great job. I think he got released from two classes. Well, basically, immediately got a $700,000 grant, and I think he's in line for some more. So I think it's a good example of how, if the talent, and we believe there's a lot, probably 150 or more professors in the system who have this kind of background, if that's unleashed, I think it could have an economic impact in those communities where they live and work. This gets back to the other sources. That shows the breakdown. The biggest, on the private side, the biggest single chunk is the Medical College of Wisconsin, but Marquette, MSOE, Lawrence do have pieces that are noteworthy. Marshfield. This gets back to, I said, those researchers are working shoulder to shoulder with degree-granting institutions anyway. The genomics initiative involves UW-Madison, the Medical College, and UW-Milwaukee. So that's unique. When the former NIH director, Elias Zerhouni, was here in October, he called it one of the most unique programs he's seen in the world. So good example then of how that really is academic. And then Blood Center, their Blood Research Institute, I was just over there the other day. They're doing some wonderful things, but a lot of it in collaboration with the Medical College, and I believe also some with UW-Milwaukee. This was our metrics on the jobs. The 36 direct and indirect jobs per million of science and engineering research, that number comes from the U.S. Department of Commerce, their Bureau of Economic Analysis. It was the most conservative economic indicator we can find, and I see David Ward, the acting and soon-to-be back to private sector chancellor at Green Bay. When we first did something like this a few years ago, I know David and I talked about this too. We saw them as high as 45 jobs per million, but this was the most conservative figure, which we think in terms of public awareness is the right thing to do. And in Wisconsin, that's the number it translates to. Now, if someone's to ask me direct versus indirect, I think probably 15,000-ish or so are direct, the rest are more indirect. That's everything from purchasing to you name it, suppliers, the whole thing. But that's the total using that metric. So this is where we took that number and showed how it stacks up against some other very familiar sectors in Wisconsin. Now, those are direct jobs, okay? So there's full disclosure right there. In those other sectors, those are direct jobs, because we couldn't figure out what their indirect was. But it just gives you a notion that R&D, as a sector in Wisconsin, academic R&D, is adding to the economy. It is a part of our fabric. It is an important piece of where we are and what we are as a state. This quote here is something that we have talked about in virtually all of our publications and work, and that's this notion that the innovation economy will be driven by human capital. It is being driven by human capital, and that's where the university system has a unique role and a unique edge. These are numbers I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on, because I think you're far more familiar with them than I ever would be. And this talks about where you've been in terms of state support. Without going through them all, our basic notion here is that until I think that very last state budget, the slide had been quite pronounced over what appeared to be 10 to 12 years to us. And we were looking at national figures, and everywhere there we seem to be sliding more in terms of state support than most other states. Again, that last budget seemed to help correct the course a little bit, and it's anyone's guess of what can happen in this budget. I'm sure Governor Doyle is not kidding when he says, an increase is the new. Well, I forgot his language, but you know what I mean. Yeah, right. The new black thing. So, but he's not kidding. I don't think he's just bluffing. I don't think he's setting up people for just to lower expectations. I think there's some reality there. Here's some other. These maybe you are less familiar with. We were 29th in full-time equivalent support. This is state support, full-time equivalent students, and so I think that's a pretty good metric to look at. And we were behind most of those states that I consider among our chief technology rivals. Even if you look at the states that are smaller than our chief technology rivals, again, I think we weren't doing quite as well there. In the Midwest, upper Midwest, we were somewhere in the middle. But that's not necessarily a great neighborhood to be in terms of when you think about these kinds of directions where we should be going. New Mexico was an example of a state that had actually increased its full-time equivalent student spending up to third among the 50 states. And then when Kauffman did its new economy index, it showed that was starting to pay off. So all of a sudden they were showing up in the top 10 and high-tech jobs and scientists and engineers and venture capital. So, I would say there's some correlation there. Some of our recommendations. Try to right the ship a little bit. Again, this is a really tough budget. I don't have to tell anyone here. But I think a compelling case can be made that in terms of protecting the market share that you have in academic R&D and increasing that market share relative to other states would be an important piece for the system. We think that cultural switch that has gone on in some campuses faster than others, certainly UW-Madison, that should continue. We think that release time makes some sense. I do realize that that's going to have to come from someplace else, but we think that's an economic investment that makes some sense. Capital projects really do help leverage and attract that outside money, that outside talent. The notion of, and some of this is more at the state level per se, the Act 255 investor tax credits in Wisconsin have worked. They've worked well. We think that needs to be broadened, and we think that's going to help encourage that kind of technology push and pull. So this is just a quote here again that we do worry a bit as a tech council that this R&D infrastructure, which is built up over decades, could deteriorate if we don't check that slide. There's some great projects out there. I'm thinking here, Chancellor Santiago and what's going on at UW-Milwaukee. It's important to really make sure that those kinds of things do take root. I think a great research institution is built over decades, but can probably deteriorate in a much smaller amount of time. So that's where we're at. This report is going to all the members of the legislature, to the press, obviously to folks like yourself within the system, and others who we think can make a difference and are part of the whole public dialogue on this. So we're just pleased to have a chance to talk to you about it.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, and I'd like to invite any members of the board if they have any questions of Tom.
Sure.
Be glad to. Jeff?
Well, I didn't hear the comparative figures that you gave us. What years were these?
This is for federal fiscal year 07. So in other words, ending September 30th of 07. That's the data that we got. That's the latest out of NSF in terms of comparing across the board.
And have you followed these figures for the last couple of years? Are they moving in?
There was a general flattening, I would say, starting in probably 02. I think David took a look at this too at some point. Everything from the effort on the war to the administration change, the run-up in the 90s did not track in this decade all that well. Not that there had been decreases, but the rate of increase had flattened out quite a bit. And so we'll see what happens. And by the way, we've got a piece on this in the report too. We have some suggestions in here about what could be done at the federal level, and we'll see what happens in terms of the new administration in Congress. Yeah.
Tom, I just want to sort of broaden the discussion a little bit beyond R&D and get your perspective on the fact that you probably know these numbers, but basically in the last 4 years we've expanded the number of students in the UW system by about 10%, despite not having a major new investment in resources. And I guess I'm just curious from the Technology Council's perspective, going forward, how important do you see that being for sort of the overall economic growth and sort of the future of Wisconsin's economy? How significant would it be if we could continue to grow? How significant will it be if we either flatline or go in the other direction as you look at other states and what's happening elsewhere?
We think it's quite significant, and this goes back to one of our first major reports was in 2003. It was called Vision 2020, a model Wisconsin economy. And in there we I think pretty carefully charted the connection between those states that have a high percentage of degreed individuals and what that means to their economy and per capita incomes. So Wisconsin, despite the fact that we produce a lot of degrees, we're still probably a percentage point or so behind the U.S. average in terms of adults with 4-year degrees. We are a percentage point plus ahead on tech college degrees. I think we look at it as they're all valuable, and increasingly that ability to transfer between institutions is really important. But to get directly to your question, we think it's an important thing, that access. Now, some of it is, what classes are they taking, what kind of degrees are they lined up with. We have something of a natural bias towards things that might be in the STEM fields. But beyond that, we think it's quite important for Wisconsin to have those people in place, especially when we look at demographics and what companies need and will need in the future. It's grads who have either they've learned enough or they know how to learn, and I think sometimes knowing how to learn is as important as anything. So I think it's a really strong effort.
Any other questions or comments for Tom? Yes, David?
Just a couple of points. David, you want to go to the mic? Sure. First, Tom, this publication really, for the first time, provided a snapshot of research and development. So I congratulate the Tech Council for doing that.
Well, thanks,
David. This is a second publication. It's a great thing to take to Rotary clubs and other places to really show what's happening. Another comment and then a sort of a question for Tom. What this doesn't show, though, is then what's the follow-on economic impact in the state from doing R&D research. That comes through tech transfer.
Right.
We can certainly see it where we're located out in the UW Research Park, but a few comments maybe about that and what the magnitude of that might be compared to the economic impact here.
Sure. I think the only metric we have right now that really speaks to that would be that Commerce Department multiplier, which I think takes into effect some of that tech transfer but not all. I think it really is more about suppliers and, you know, people who kind of work with the academic institutions themselves on the research end. I don't think the Commerce Multiplier does a good job of actually talking about the tech transfer effect. Wisconsin is, the best example ever, of course, is right here at University Research Park. I continue to marvel at people who come in from around the country, around the world to take a look at that. But it doesn't always have to be of that size to be effective, and it doesn't always have to be life science oriented to be effective. I think some of the things that will be going on in Milwaukee are going to be extremely important. I think some of the things that could happen around the rest of the state are very important. Tech transfer, the one issue I think we need to grapple with a little bit is if you look at the number of disclosures, patents, license fees, those kinds of things that the Association of University Technology Managers takes a look at, and others. We should naturally believe, and we instinctively think, that there should be a little bigger in terms of number of startups. A lot of the work that's gone on at WARF has been tremendous. They have really ramped up in that area in the past, especially the past 10 years, I think. But it could probably be that much better. The WISIS effort, I think, has been valuable, and the kinds of things I see in terms of what MJON has done around the state is truly good. So tech transfer, if you look at well, let me give you one good example. Let me just talk about 1 second about TomoTherapy, which is here in town. This is an interesting case study, and it also speaks to tax credits. TomoTherapy spun off of this campus here, basically two folks. They slowly began hiring. At one point, they were at about 20 employees. They were down to maybe $130,000 in the bank. They, at that time, received some help through a state tax credit program, which actually no longer exists, but there's the successor program now. That helped them as they were going along to find more financing. Well, long story short, they raised $42 million in private financing. They raised $189 million when they went public. They have, even despite some slight downturn in their workforce this past year, they're still well north of 600 employees and a huge force in this community. That's tech transfer. That's an idea that spun off of this campus with a couple of professors, and is one of the larger companies in this town and even in this state today. So I think that's a good example of what can and has been accomplished over time. Epic Systems. That began as a UW spinoff many, many years ago. Judy Faulkner's first office was on, the address is kind of neat, 2020 University Avenue. That says something, doesn't it? And, you can find those kinds of stories. I would maintain, and this is why we focused on what's going on around the system in this report, that those kinds of stories can and should be replicated in places far beyond Madison. Does that get to what you were wondering about, David? Okay.
Any other questions for Tom?
Could I pick up one?
Yes.
It isn't a question for Tom, but it's to pick up on something that Chancellor Ward said that I've said before, but it reminds me of it. When he mentioned about speaking to the Rotary clubs. I think one of the roles of the regents that we should look at, just think about, expanding from what we have done, is the regents as spokespersons for the universities, for the cause of the university, for the research and development, whatever it might be, in Rotary clubs, in other local organizations of 20, 30, 40, Milwaukee, 200 people. I think it's something we could do if the staff helped us prepare, for those of us who'd be interested in it. And I think it would help a lot at this time to generate public support for the university based strictly on facts and information. It's a story it gets lost so much now with so many other things in the news, but I think we shouldn't underestimate the local, but it's the Rotary and the clubs and those people. They're very interested, and I think they'd be open to hearing us.
You know, I think you'd be surprised at the amount of individual activity there is from present and past board members, but I do agree. I think it would be a good idea to try to formalize that more with assistance and encouraging people and helping them with scheduling, which the staff here is able to do and is very, very capable.
I know you've done it and our leadership's done it, but I think the rest of us could help too.
And some others have. I agree, and I'd be willing to work on that.
Let me offer it. I think what I'll ask maybe Dave Drew to do is just to forward to all of you the PowerPoint, that the one I used with WMC and have started to use with talking to the Kiwanis next week here in Madison, and I think with pretty minor modification you could use it in those kinds of venues, and we can help you make those modifications. Mark, I just wanted to say I think the Wisconsin Technology Council under Tom Still's leadership has done consistently substantive, evidence-based, really first-class work on where we need to go in Wisconsin and how the university and other major players can help get us there around issues in technology and research and development and the STEM areas. I think the work the Tech Council has done consistently, the work David J. Ward has done with North Star Economics are two of the big building blocks under the growth agenda for Wisconsin. I mean, we could not have put that together unless we had the platform provided by these good folks. Tom, as you may recall, was going back to the economic summits that the university sponsored, was the facilitator for those summits, where a lot of these conversations really got underway. So I just wanted to thank him for all of that and say we do really value the work that's going on here. And it's part of what's great about the Tech Council is its objectivity, I think, is respected, and its evidence-based approach is accepted. It's not us just talking about us. It's a third party that is disinterested in that sense, talking about the work that we do in education, and that's really important to have those voices heard. And I think another thing they've done very well is to translate often mounds of complicated numbers and data into publications and statements that interested citizens in Wisconsin can digest and understand, and is persuasive. And that's not an easy trick to do. And I think Tom's background before he got to the Tech Council, the newspaper business, helps a little bit with that too. So we really appreciate all of that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks for the chance to be here today.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. And that concludes my report, and I call upon President Riley to make the System President report.
Thank you, President Bradley. And I just wanted to have us think for a minute about the guest presentations we started out with this morning. The Know How to Go kids and Tom Still and the Wisconsin Technology Council. You know, they're really two ends of the same spectrum. One is, how do we continue to work with our families, pre-college students, the schools, to get them prepared, to get them aspiring, to get them to be financially able to come on into post-secondary education? And then, how do we work at the other far end of the spectrum after they graduate so that there are jobs there that have a future for them, so that they can stay in Wisconsin and work and build a career here? So I think it's kind of very nice image to think of us working at the front end that way more actively, and at the other end, the far end, that way more actively, and of course everything in between as well. And speaking of that far end, I want to continue to talk a little bit about that end of the spectrum and what Tom had to say. If you look back at the action item number 3 from yesterday morning's discussion, it's in your packets among the one-page items that Rebecca and her colleagues prepared for us. This is the action step that says transform research into leading edge jobs and economic vitality for Wisconsin, and the summary of it briefly is The UW system will step up efforts to connect academic research with the private sector and transform ideas into new jobs and new businesses that will attract and employ college-educated workers. The UW system is committed to forging campus industry collaborations to develop next-generation technologies and products, provide needed resources in student training, and accelerate technology transfer that will drive innovation and position the UW campuses and Wisconsin as leaders for generations to come. Well, I think the Technology Council report shows that we've made real progress in that area, but recognizing that, as Tom was saying, we still need to do more to fully leverage the research capacity across this system. I'm announcing a new Research to Jobs Task Force today. This group will examine the UW research, patent, and commercialization process. I will ask the task force to research and identify the existing or potential barriers to the process and to identify methods of cooperation and incentives that could be implemented. I'm also asking the task force to make recommendations for establishing benchmarks and outcomes to facilitate getting the research through the discovery, patenting, licensure, commercialization process more expeditiously. And as Tom implied, when we look at the data, it would seem to tell us that while we do very well in Wisconsin with the research and patenting steps, we don't do as well as we should with the licensing and commercialization steps. We don't take enough of our intellectual property down all of the steps in that chain to commercialization. So we want to do several things with this task force. We want to identify how ways in which the UW can play a leading role in supporting more industrial innovation in the state, accelerating the growth of Wisconsin companies here, and fostering those knowledge-based, high-paying jobs that will sustain our economy well into the future. So I'm very pleased to say that Carl Gulbranson, the managing director of the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, has agreed to chair this task force, and we anticipate the group will begin work very soon. We'll be announcing the other members shortly, and the hope is that they'll be reporting back to me with some recommendations this summer. When they do, we will certainly share that group's wisdom with this board. So as Tom indicated, it's clear that we have to continue to build our universities as pipelines of innovation. And the Research to Jobs Task Force is in line with one of the recommendations in this Wisconsin Technology Council report that we look at that transfer process of technology from the laboratory to the marketplace and grease those skids even more fully than we have in the past. A couple words, if I can, about the state budget situation. And as Mark indicated, we'll be talking in depth about that at the March meeting of this board. Right now, the fact of the matter is that we really don't have a whole lot of information about the 09-11 budget plans, what provisions they may contain, how it will be affected, but we know the UW system will be affected. Last week we heard the governor say very clearly in the State of the State message that we can expect some challenging times ahead. He also said again, and he said this again and again, that he wants to protect education, including the UW, and that's very good news. In the end, however, I think nobody will be untouched by this sweeping economic downturn, and that includes us. We're already, of course, beginning to feel the impact of the crisis. As discussed in yesterday's Business, Finance, and Audit Committee meeting, university endowments are struggling, both here in the UW and nationwide. The economic crisis has imposed steep cuts on the value of these endowments, and the repercussions are only beginning to be felt. Our committee, Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, yesterday directed our trust fund officers to suspend distributions from more than 30 endowments held in trust by the board. In each case, the market value of these funds has fallen at least 5% below the initial value of the endowments. Rather than further erode the principal, we're taking prudent steps to preserve these funds for the long term. For now, just to give you a feel of it, this equates to more than $700,000 in reduced payments to various scholarships, research projects, and other initiatives at our institutions. We're in the process of alerting our campuses to this decision. Again, our goal is to preserve the long-term benefit that comes from the proceeds of these endowment funds. Doing so, however, will create short-term challenges for our campuses, for individual academic departments, for research centers that receive some of these payouts, for public broadcasting, in some cases for individual students where scholarship funds may be affected. In some cases, our institutions will reallocate other resources to make up for lost income, putting those other resources under stress. In other situations, we'll be tightening our belts and simply getting by with fewer resources. We'll have to suspend some activities we know we should be doing. There are some people, I think, under the impression that universities across the nation will be able to, quote, live off their endowments to ride this through without having a scratch. We've heard some of that coming from Washington, people saying, well, what's the problem? We have all these big endowments. In the public sector, certainly, but in most of the private sector, even in some of the traditionally well-endowed private sector institutions, that's not true. And based on the examples I just shared about the action that our Business, Finance, and Audit Committee directed our trust fund managers to do yesterday, it's clear that the UW system, like everyone with a savings account or a mutual fund, is feeling the effects of a bear market already. Even in this kind of challenging environment, we remain determined to press forward with as much of the growth agenda for Wisconsin as we possibly can. We're convinced that this is the right path for the state. We'll continue to work closely with the governor and with the legislature, encouraging them to provide us with the level of investment that will let us keep at least part of the growth agenda alive as we struggle through this recession. And we have to remember all the time that it's not just at board meetings like this and in the state capitol where the impact of these difficult economic times is discussed. Families sitting around the dinner table all over Wisconsin are considering the same bad news, looking at their own financial situations, wondering if the college dreams they've nurtured for their kids, planned for their kids, will somehow not come to fruition. We have to do everything we can to avoid having that scenario play out. Amid all the uncertainty and bleak forecasts, I think it's critical to reinforce our message to families and students all around the state that we want them to come to our universities. Working with our state and our federal leaders, we will help families finance those college dreams. And I hope that when the governor gives his budget address on February 17th, we will have some important new news about how we'll do that. We cannot afford to price people out of college, nor can we afford to undermine the quality or the quantity of educational opportunity at this point in our history. As the global economic crisis continues to unfold, we've seen and heard reports of universities elsewhere that are cutting the numbers of students they admit or considering double-digit tuition hikes. We do not want to do either of those things. Even in such times, maybe particularly in such times, we still firmly believe in the need to grow the number of college graduates. Actions that go in the opposite direction are short-sighted, short-term fixes that will prove counterproductive in the long term. And we certainly don't want to have to go there in Wisconsin. Fortunately, there is one beacon of hope on the horizon that I think we're all aware of. Signs are that the proposed Federal Economic Recovery Act will include support for higher education. The shape and the scope of that support is still being worked out as we speak, but it appears that there are significant provisions in the way they stand now in both the House and the Senate versions that would provide some help to our students and our institutions. Chris Andrews, our Assistant Vice President for Federal Relations, has been keeping close tabs on these rapidly moving developments, so I will turn the floor over to Chris to tell us more about the federal stimulus package and higher education, what it might mean for higher education generally, and what it might mean for us here in Wisconsin. Chris.
Mark, I think you called us Cracker Jack staff.
Yes.
You did, and I'm beginning to feel like you're not going to think I'm so crackerjack, because by the time I tell you what's happening, it's probably going to be different once you leave the room.
I was just going to write down the number.
Bags of funding. There'll be lots of caveats. So as all of you know, the House of Representatives passed its economic stimulus proposal and did it on a fairly party line basis. But education aid was really a very, very significant part of that package, intended to help states avoid significant cuts to education, both pre-K through higher ed. And this state and the higher education community just owes a debt load of thanks to Chairman David Obey for the work that he did to recognize the importance of education to this country and to our economic competitiveness moving forward. The Senate is currently debating its version of the bill. Quite frankly, they don't have the votes there yet to pass the bill out of the Senate. It's about a $900 billion bill over 10 years, and they've got a group of moderates, Republicans and Democrats, that are working now and working with Obama to try to pare that back down. They hope to have a bill to the President by the President's Day recess, which is February 16th. Very, very ambitious. But with the new job numbers coming out today, I think that there is a feeling that something must pass and must pass soon to get help to people in the states. There's a couple parameters that the feds have used in both their bills. The funds are generally distributed through existing formulas or on a competitive basis. There's numerous provisions in the bill that ensure that the funding will be expedited and carried out efficiently, or it will go back to the feds. And I thought this was rather humorous, but the House bill prevents Governor Blagojevich, now former governor, from directing the use of funds provided in the package. So, as I said, it's very, very fluid. I believe you all have a handout that sort of shows it's broken down here by support for students. It's interesting, the Pell Grant actually is becoming one of the provisions that they're arguing over whether or not it belongs in a stimulus. But both bills increase the maximum Pell Grant and pay the Pell Grant shortfall. What that means is, by paying the shortfall, is when there's a net result in the gap between what Congress funds and what they need to maintain that funding award. And it happens when we see a surge in students or we see more students with needs. So the House bill increases the grant by $500 in both academic years, 09-010 and 010-11. The Senate, as you can see, it is a smaller increase, but both plans would increase the Pell Grant. The House increases the limit on unsubsidized loans. The Senate did not provide such a provision. The Senate provided a provision to fund capital contributions in the Perkins Loan Program, which is a revolving loan program on our college campuses. And that provision was not included in the House. Both the bills have a Hope tax credit, which is provided to help offset the cost of education. Both bills raise the maximum education credit from $1,800 to $2,500 and extend the credit from 2 years to 4 years. Both bills would make the credit available to everyone regardless of their tax liability. In terms of infrastructure, funding for public and private higher education infrastructure is in both the House and the Senate bills. The House bill contains a bigger allocation for its program at $6 billion. The Senate bill includes about $3.5 billion, although there is an amendment being taken up on the Senate floor today to increase that to $6 billion in the Senate as well. Funds are to be used for higher education modernization, renovation, and repair. The Congressional Research Service estimates that Wisconsin could expect to receive about $116.2 million in stimulus funds that would be shared among all post-secondary education institutions in the state if the House provision will remain at $6 billion. Additionally, in the House, there is a $1.5 billion amount of funds for grants and loans to colleges for energy sustainability and efficiency. Scientific research, again, there's big variations between what the House and the Senate is currently recommending. The House is at about $11 billion, the Senate at $6 billion. There's significant increases in the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and the U.S. Department of Energy. This is obviously good news for Wisconsin. We are extremely competitive, as Tom had said, national leaders in research expenditures, and according to the National Science Foundation. So those increases we would compete very, very well for. The final provision I wanted just to talk about briefly is that both House and Senate bills would create a $79 billion state fiscal stabilization fund that would send federal funding to states for pressing needs. And the fund would basically create two block grants. The larger block grant would provide $39 billion to states for public education needs and be allocated to each state's population of individuals between ages 5 and 24. A portion of the funds would be dedicated to helping states maintain their education funding commitments. The remainder would flow directly to local school districts. The smaller block grant would provide approximately $25 billion. That would be allocated on each state's total population, and that would be to support some basic services such as public safety and law enforcement, elderly, people with disabilities, and may include higher education. Both of the block grants would be allocated by the governors. And there is a requirement that in order to receive block grants, that states would be required to fund both K-12 and higher education at no less than their fiscal year 2006 level. And in both FY09 and FY10, and then the funds provided by the State Stabilization Fund could be used to restore state support for post-secondary education to the 2008 level. So, as I said, it's extremely fluid. There is, I think, good news there in that higher education is very much recognized as for its importance, and that we should continue to reinforce what an important investment that this is in our institutions at this time.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris on what is clearly a rapidly evolving situation in Washington?
President?
Yes, Brent.
Maybe Chris or somebody else can answer this. I think we've heard a lot about once the money gets to Wisconsin, how it's going to be, who's going to make the decisions, what mechanism is there for making decisions on how the money is going to be spent. Where are we on that as to understanding that mechanism or lack thereof? Anybody?
Well, yeah, let me say a few things. There's lots of debate in lots of areas about this as to whether governors will have a lot of authority, governors and legislators, whether in the higher ed area, the public state higher education agency, which we don't really have one of in Wisconsin, will have that authority. So that is all unsettled and being debated at the current time. What we do know is the governor announced the formation of his Office of Recovery and Reinvestment recently with Gary Walter from MG&E, CEO there, leading the office, and Al Fish from UW-Madison being his deputy. And that has representation on it now from all the major state agencies, including university tech colleges. Andy Richards has been representing us in that office. I am now in the process of putting together an internal UW system recovery and reinvestment task force that I've asked Tom Andrus to head, and we've begun to talk to people on the campuses about who might work with us on that, because I think, as your question implies, we are really going to need to be ready once this money flows in through the state office to us to get it out quickly in the variety of areas that Chris outlined here. So we want to have a little, I'll call it a mirror operation of the State Office of Recruitment, of Reinvestment and Recovery in the UW system, working with Andy and Tom leading those two pieces, so we're ready to go. But, Chris, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, an awful lot of that is still unsettled, and it's part of what's being debated right now. Is that right?
Well, and as I said, I think that a lot of it will be distributed through, wherever possible, existing formulas. So existing federal formulas to the states, competitively in terms of the research, and then in terms of block grants to the governors for the stabilization fund.
Stay tuned.
Yes. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Chris. And I just wanted to add my thanks to Chairman David Obey to Chris's as well, because, you know, in the three big areas, his attention in the bill that was crafted in the House has been really important. Investing in Pell Grants, number one. Number two, the recognition that we have a lot of facility needs, modernization, renovation, repair in our higher ed facilities. He looked after that area. And in the R&D area, he's been one of the people, if you've seen him, articulating the value of that in Washington. And we thank him for the kind of investment of time, energy that he's put in. And it hasn't, some of the work he's done hasn't always been greeted with applause, and he's taken a few slaps up the side of the head, and we're grateful for his hanging in there on some of the things he's proposed. So, again, there's a lot more we don't know than we do at this point. Stay tuned. Next month we'll know a lot more, and we'll come back to you with a much more in-depth discussion. But I do want to assure you that each of our institutions, I guess I'll put it this way, has been planning for the worst and hoping for the best. So, you know, we're hoping that the cuts will be mitigated to the maximum amount possible, but we're planning, what do we do if they're deeper than we would like to see? On the other hand, we're planning, what do we do if we get an infusion of money from the stimulus package in a number of the areas that Chris outlined? So it's a little bit of a bipolar set of activities going on at the moment, but I think that's what we need to be doing. So I don't know if there are any questions generally going back to the state budget side or anything on the budget more. Yes, Regent.
I guess I'm asking a question, but I'm also making a comment insofar as we will need to be nimble to accept whatever resources that are coming, and I mean we, meaning the state, and obviously higher ed and UW system. When we're talking about bricks and mortar and building and improving infrastructure and all of that kind of stuff, some of us were talking about this morning, that you know, the fact that it takes so long to get things built. I'm hoping that what's also on the table is some significant movement on not deregularizing, but whatever it takes to make it for it to not take as long as it takes to get things done, because it seems to me that the money's going to go back to the feds.
Well, we've had conversations, we've been involved in conversations with the governor, with the building commission on exactly that topic today, and I don't know, Tom or David Miller, do you want to add?
Kevin, I'm going
to
make a few comments on that during our committee report.
Okay. Well, good. Maybe we'll wait and we'll hear from the chairman. Anything else on this? Okay.
I had a question, Kevin, on something you said before. I guess it has to do with the scope of the charge that you're giving to the R&D task force.
The Carl Branson one.
I was struck by one of the recommendations that the Tech Council is making in its report, and that Tom mentioned in his presentation, that we should do more to free the time of hundreds of non-Madisonian campus professors who have the credentials and the desire to conduct high-level R&D. Is that recommendation part of the scope of this task force, or is this something that we should be considering outside of that process?
No, I think what the timing of this is fortuitous. What we will do is to ask Carl and his colleagues to take a very close look at all of the recommendations. Indeed, the very formation of that task force is recommended really as one recommendation in this report, but there are a lot of other recommendations that we'd like them to look at and come back and tell us whether they think we ought to do them, and if so, how, whether they're realistic, in what time frame, etc.
Because I really like that thought, and I think it's proven itself valuable in Madison and elsewhere.
All right, I normally take a few minutes to share some good news from around the system, but in the interest of time, I think I'll say that I trust that the Know How to Go winners and the Tech Council report will be enough inspiration to sustain us for a little while ahead. But I did want to close by acknowledging President Bradley that February 14th is Valentine's Day, and I thought I'd recite a poem in honor of Valentine's Day by Thomas Moore, who's an early 19th century Irish poet, kind of a balladeer who took a lot of ancient Irish tunes and put very flowery, early 19th century, very romantic language to them. And even his martial tunes are romantic. The Minstrel Boy being one some of you may know. But this is one about romance, short-term and long-term, from Thomas Moore. It's called Believe Me If All Those Endearing Young Charms. Oh, believe me if all those endearing young charms which I gaze on so fondly today were to change by tomorrow and flee from my arms like the fairy gifts fading away. Thou wouldst still be adored as this moment thou art, let thy loveliness fade as it will, and around the dear ruin each wish of my heart would entwine itself verdantly still. For 'tis not while beauty and truth are thine own, and thy cheeks unprofaned by a tear, that the fervor and faith of a soul can be known, to whom time will but make thee more dear. For the heart that is truly loved never forgets, but as truly loves on to the close, as the sunflower turns on her God as he sets, the same look which she turned as he rose. That concludes my Valentine's Day report, Mr. President.
Thank you, President Riley. I had a conversation a few months ago with the president of the University of California system, and he said, it might be interesting for us just to get together and talk about how our board meetings are the same and how they're different. You'd be my lead.
Yep, the different part.
The different part, yeah, that's right. And better. Well, now we will go into the part of our agenda for our committee reports, and we'll begin with a report from Regent Bartel from the Capital Planning and Budget Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Capital Planning and Budget Committee wants to assure the board that it is shovel-ready. We met yesterday afternoon and approved our minutes, and the following resolutions were unanimously approved by the committee and are now presented as a consent agenda item. These resolutions are in your materials if you want to follow along. Resolution 1.3.B requests authority to increase the scope and budget to $4.6 million, mostly program revenue supported borrowing, and to construct the UW Extension Lowell Hall guest room renovation project. The increase is due to higher than anticipated construction costs and the need to install a building-wide fire sprinkler system. The project will convert office space on the 5th, 6th, and 7th floor of Lowell Hall into 58 guest rooms and consolidate the operations of the Pyle and Lowell conference centers, housing overnight conference guests in close proximity to both. Resolution 1.3.C seeks authority to increase the budget by approximately $7 million to $94.8 million and construct the UW-Madison Union South replacement project. Now, you'll recall that at our December board meeting, we authorized the demolition of the current Union South, built in the late 60s, to make way for this new South Union. The total project cost includes $3.5 million of gift funding and $87 million of program revenue borrowing supported by segregated fees that were approved by student referendum here in Madison. The design stage of this project resulted in a higher cost estimate than the original enumerated budget, and although the campus considered options for reducing the scope of the budget and did do so, the budget increase is needed to provide the original scope of the project that was called for in the referendum. To fund the difference, the campus will provide additional program revenue cash for the parking ramp. They will add gift funds and utilize existing bonding authority with the student seg fee supported from the second phase of the project, which is scheduled to begin in several years, that involves the Memorial Union Theater Wing. The reallocation was approved. This reallocation of those seg fees was approved by the Student-Led Union Council. Now, the committee heard yesterday from Mark Guthier and Shana Hetzel of the Wisconsin Union, and also from two current UW-Madison students, Kurt Gosling and Tyler Younger. The students raised the issue of whether this project funding change should be reviewed by the Segregated University Fee Allocation Committee, the SUFAC. There was a lively discussion on this subject, and it led the committee to adopt a revised resolution, which you have in your materials, which provides that a commitment on the part of the Chancellor's Office to address the project funding structure with the campus SUFAC. The students did not object to the project as such. They just raised the question of the process, and the committee agreed that there should be consultation with SUFAC on that. Resolution 1.3.D, seeking authority to construct a lakeside improvement, utility improvements project at a cost of $4.7 million. This will support and expand utility infrastructure along the campus lakeshore in Madison. The utilities provided in this phase will include a steam and compressed air system, chilled water, and electrical signal systems. Resolution 1.3.E requests authority to seek a statutory waiver to allow acceptance of a single prime contractor bid for the Chazen Museum of Art addition. This project was enumerated in the 2005-2007 capital budget, and last August we approved an increase of the project cost to $47.1 million. This project will construct, as you probably recall, a new building addition to the Chazen Museum at the site of the Peterson Administration Building. The campus is requesting a single prime bidding for this project to ensure that one contractor takes responsibility for coordination, scheduling, and quality control, which is a construction procedure that is much more effective than having multiple prime bidding. And I'll talk a little more about this at the end of this presentation. Also, the campus is requesting an exemption from the statutory Percent for Art program, which the committee ultimately was persuaded that an art museum didn't have to comply with. Not because it's an art museum, but because they do plan to make acquisitions of site-specific art for this project, which are considerably in excess of the 1/4% that the state statutes set aside for art in all major state construction projects. Revised Resolution 1.3.F is brought by UW-Madison, requesting authority to accept a parcel of land which is located on West Johnson Street from the Wharf Properties LLC. This is a property that is part of the exchange that we have under an exchange agreement with Wharf, under which the Wharf acquires property and transfers it to the Board of Regents for use in the property that we have transferred is for use in the Widmer project, and WRF is adding to our portfolio properties at our request. This resolution is contingent upon receipt of an appraisal supporting the property's value, which is approximately $4.3 million, and an acceptable environmental audit, which has not yet been done. Resolution 1.3.G is brought by UW Parkside requesting authority to increase the scope and budget to $38.6 million and to construct communications art remodeling and addition project. The total project cost of this is $38.6 mostly general fund supported borrowing, but including $2.1 million in gift funds, which will have to be raised in hand or secured by the time that bids are let. The project will remodel space in 3 facilities to expand the theater arts department, expand the music department, the art department, construct some mid-sized classrooms, and relocate media services, and construct a freestanding sculpture courtyard. The scope and the budget increase is requested to provide for reconstruction and expansion of the Communications Arts parking lot, and you may remember these facilities when we were there visiting. Was it last year we went to Parkside? And the reconfiguration of adjacent roads. This is a wonderful project, and hopefully it'll now move forward. Finally, revised Resolution 1.3.H requests approval to construct 9 minor projects on 4 campuses under the All-Agency Maintenance Fund program. One notable project of these is the $2.2 million UW-Milwaukee Green Museum renovation project, which will comprehensively renovate and rehabilitate this historic structure on the UW-Milwaukee campus. Built in 1913 and has been vacant for the last 17 years. It will be restored to useful condition in collaboration with the Historical Society and become a multi-purpose exhibit, meeting, and education center. I think it's a very exciting project. These 7 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, and I now move adoption of resolutions 1.3B, C, D, E, F, G, and H as a package.
Is there a second to the motion? Been seconded. Is there a request to remove any item from the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Assistant Vice President David Miller then reported to the committee that the Building Commission had approved $73 million for projects at their December and January meetings. We were pleased about that. And he also reported to the committee on what seems to be some good progress in developing procedures with the State Department of Administration and the Building Commission for streamlining the capital planning and budgeting process. This will have the effect, we think, of reducing the amount of time between project consideration, the initiation, and completion. And it will improve budget accuracy. There are a number of reforms that we are pursuing, and we hope to be able to bring these to the board for endorsement in the very near future. I won't go into great detail on them, but let me identify 3 areas that I think we will be addressing. Number 1, establishing more realistic thresholds for the required project approvals by the Department of State Facilities, the State Building Commission, and the legislature. There are thresholds at which each of these entities have to be involved. What the proposal will be is to lowering those, or raising those thresholds so that lower dollar amounts can move through more rapidly. Secondly, preparing individual project budgets at a point later in the process when more design work has been completed. in order to obtain a more accurate budget. At the present time, our enumeration of projects occurs prior to really a whole lot of design work, so that we're basically guessing. So it's what we used to call in the military a wild-eyed guess, wild-ass guess. And and David remembers this. And so the hope is that we can present to the legislature more accurate budgets and not have to go back again in the next budget cycle to increase the budget or modify it. And the third item is to modernize project delivery methods by using single prime or construction manager approaches, which are much more efficient than multi-prime bidding, in order to control costs and save a lot of time. These are methods that developers, private developers, are much more acquainted with and much more devoted to, and this will take some changes in the statutes and in the procedures that we're using. So there is, as I say, there is some hope that these things are going to be moving forward. David Miller reported that Secretary Hellbach of the Building Commission is favorably inclined on these things. There are still hurdles to be reached and overcome, but in the next several months, I think we will have some progress.
Good. Regent Davis?
A question for you, Jeff, and that is, because I'm sure we all agree that there's, because of the opportunity, there should be a really pretty strong sense of urgency in removing unnecessary hurdles while maintaining the responsibility for being accountable for the resources and such. So my question is, is it possible or advisable to have goals for shrinking the number of years it takes to complete a project from the time it's proposed to the time the building's there? And I can see it. Because it seems like to me if there was a goal of we want to shrink it by 5 years, I'm making it up for the sake of the point, then the interventions or the changes or what have you would be viewed in the lens of whether it's going to actually get us to the point of fast as we would define it. What do you think about that?
I think that's an admirable objective. The fact is that the projects that I've been aware of since I've been on this committee move forward at different speeds. Many of them are much too slow. Many of them, some of them take as long as 8 or 10 years from initiation to completion or more. A few have gone much faster than that because they use different delivery methods, or there are substantial gift funds involved that they aren't perhaps scrutinized as frequently and as carefully. We have to provide, for. I don't know that we have an absolute goal of 5 years or 4 years or whatever. Certainly, the procedures that I described will reduce that, if implemented, would reduce that amount of time by some significant amount. One of the problems that we have, of course, is that we have campuses whose funding for these projects comes partly from gift funds. And that you can't always predict when that is going to be available, or so sometimes that's the stumbling block for the timing. But we're going to do our best to see if we can get these procedures in place and reduce that number.
Regent Falbo?
Is it possible, considering that we may have some funds coming in the way of support in the federal package, to create a model of how you might want to move forward with building projects with these special funds that you can go to the Department of Administration and say, we'd like to use this model this time, expedite projects, and then possibly, if you can get agreement to that, possibly expand that to be a permanent.
I think that's a great idea, Mike, because we don't yet know what the funds can be used for. I mean, when I first heard about this, my thought was, oh my goodness, we have all these capital projects in the pipeline. Boy, we can put these in if the building commission and DOA will allow us. We can be in the ground, with a shovel in the next 6 months. It does. The last I heard, the funds that will be available for capital projects will not be new construction. They will be maintenance, repair, and renovation. And those we handle, depending on the size, we handle in a little different way than we do our major capital projects. But we don't know what's going to come yet. And if we are able to spend on new capital projects, I think that's a great idea. I mean, we can use that as impetus to try to get some of these process improvements in place.
Any other questions of Regent Bartel? Does that conclude your report?
It concludes my report, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. And I'll call upon Regent Davis to give the report of the Education Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm pleased to provide the summary, and it is a brief summary, from yesterday's meeting of the Education Committee. The Education Committee began its meeting with the report of the UW Systems Nursing Education Task Force from Rosemary Smith, who is Dean of the UW Oshkosh School of Nursing. That report is in your materials, and I won't repeat its contents other than to say that Wisconsin, like the rest of the country, faces critical workforce shortages both in practice nurses and in nursing faculty. This is not because students don't want to study nursing. At UW-Madison, we were told that there are 400 applicants for every 100 spots in the nursing program, and the UW programs throughout our system have similar problems. The issue here is the inability of our existing programs to accommodate all of the students who want to pursue baccalaureate degrees in nursing. And it's not just a question of opening up slots or adding nursing programs at other UW institutions. This really is a question of capacity, broadly construed, of having faculty to teach more students and identifying more clinical placements for students. The report makes 6 key recommendations to address the major challenges facing the nursing profession. Again, I refer you to the report, and I hope, like me, you will hold on to it because I think it does an excellent job of guiding us into the future. It will take many educators and policymakers throughout the state to work together on implementing these recommendations. Let me just add that over the past 14 months, the committee has heard several presentations on the changing context for nursing education and practice. This has been enormously valuable to us as we work to make program decisions that meet the needs of students and the workforce. Yesterday's presentation was no exception. There are several new nursing programs that will come before the committee, and therefore the board, in the months and years to come, and this report will serve us in good stead in our deliberations. Associate Vice President Stephen Collison guided us through a set of draft criteria for UW Comprehensives proposing to offer professional doctorates, which are also in your materials. And in fact, I think we all had a handout of the slide presentation. The committee had asked for these criteria in November following the policy discussion we had on the evolving national context for professional doctorates. There was consensus among our committee that the growth in professional doctorates is likely inevitable. I know I'm taking liberties now. And that the proposed criteria are, for the most part, the right ones. We're in a different place than we were 30-plus years ago when only UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee were given explicit statutory authority to offer research doctoral degrees. The criteria seek to set the bar high for any new professional doctorates that will be developed at the comprehensives. And yet, committee members were clear that the UW system needs to be nimble and competitive. Our neighbors in Minnesota, for example, have added several professional doctorates to the program array at state comprehensives, not to mention lots of activity at the privates. We don't want to set up barriers for the comprehensives, but we do want to ensure institutional capacity and the integrity of their undergraduate missions and programming. We think the proposed criteria will do that. We enjoyed a rigorous, vigorous, and thoughtful discussion among committee members, chancellors, provosts, staff, resulting in what I believe are helpful amendments to these criteria as they have been proposed. We should note that as a procedural point, the board doesn't need to approve these criteria. That lies within the purview of the Academic Affairs Department. However, we have been assured that our input is indeed valued and that those criteria will be revised in light of the conversation at yesterday's meeting. The committee then heard a presentation on the Know How to Go network, which served as a timely follow-up to Senior Vice President Martin's update on the growth agenda action steps yesterday morning. The presentation included a detailed overview of UW Green Bay's Future Phoenix program, which serves as a model mentoring program for Know How to Go in Wisconsin. The highlight of the presentation was hearing from Michael Lund Ziegler, a senior at UW Green Bay, who serves as a Future Phoenix Fellow. There are 9 of them. His report of the impact of the program, both on the kids he has mentored and on his own intellectual and personal development, was extremely powerful and moving. The program's first cohort of students will be going to college in 2010, and we'll look forward to hearing assessment data that speaks to the impact of this program on enrollment and persistence. We then finally had a report from Senior Vice President Martin. Rebecca previewed for us some of the steps UW system and the institutions are taking to address the high cost of textbooks, including short-term and long-term actions. In May, the Education Committee and Business Finance and Audit, right, Brett, will convene a joint meeting in which we will hear a full report. We know this is a complex issue with economic, technical, legal, and faculty and student governance issues involved. Senior Vice President Martin also briefed us on work underway on program realignment, and the development of a 3-year baccalaureate degree. Again, Associate Vice President Collison is going to be very busy. He's convening 2 working groups composed of provosts and others to further develop these initiatives. The Program Realignment Group will collect and analyze data on the system's entire program array, looking at institutional capacity, student demand, and Wisconsin's workforce needs. This analysis will help all of us, the institutions, the Office of Academic Affairs, the regions, to make future academic programming decisions that are responsible and informed based on the data. The second group working group is exploring the possibility of establishing a 3-year baccalaureate degree or 3-year baccalaureate degree tracks at selected UW institutions. This degree option would not be for everyone, but might serve the needs of highly motivated, well-prepared, and or non-traditional students in selected majors. The group is studying is it Bologna, Mike, or is it Bologna? Bologna. Okay, Bologna is the approach. That's kind of inside joke to the committee.
Change it to forensic.
Right. And looking at other models at higher education institutions in the U.S. There is much to determine in terms of benefits, costs, challenges before any UW institutions would be ready to move forward on this. Finally, Senior Vice President Martin announced that that Vicki Washington, who has been giving her heart and soul to the system's diversity work in an interim role, has been appointed the Associate Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion following a national search. I couldn't be happier, and I'm sure that all of us would agree, that under Vicki's leadership, we are hopeful that significant movement of the needle in terms of our modest progress to date on closing the achievement gap will be led strongly. It is more than time that we move towards authentic equity, diversity, and inclusion for our students, faculty, and staff, and for Wisconsin's capacity to truly be a player in the global economy and to participate fully in the reinvigoration of this nation's democracy. Yes, we can, and yes, we will. I love that part. Thank you. So, Regent Bradley. In addition to the minutes from the December 4th, 2008 minutes, both those for the joint meeting with Business Finance and Audit on the Wisconsin Partnership Program and those for the Education Committee, the Education Committee approved the following resolution, which I now move as the consent agenda for your action. Resolution 11E(3), authorizing implementation of the BS in Personal Finance at UW-Madison. Resolution 11 E, Grant 4, authorizing implementation of the BS in athletic training at UW Milwaukee, and Resolution 11E5, authorizing implementation of the BA/BS in women's studies at UW Oshkosh.
Is there a second to the motion? Moved and seconded. A request to remove any item from the consent agenda?
I would like to remove E4 to discuss it.
Okay, we'll remove 11E4. Any other requests? Okay, could we have a vote on the resolution with that item removed? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And Regent Bartel, you move passage of 11E4?
No, I wanted to discuss it.
Well, I'll move it just to get the discussion.
And the seconder would second it? I do. Okay, Regent Bartel.
Okay, as I understand it, this act would create a Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training at UW Milwaukee. I read the materials. It appears that the graduates of this program are, as athletic trainers, basically go to work in sports medicine facilities, and both private and public. And they are expecting to, if I'm reading this correctly, graduate between 10 and 12 graduates a year for the first 5 years at a cost of what appears to be over $400,000. Am I correct on that? I mean, that seems like an awful lot of money for a very small return.
I think Senior Vice President Martin wants to...
I don't believe Provost Cheng
She's not
is here,
here.
so I will attempt to convey what she conveyed to the committee yesterday. This is not a new program, Regent Bartel. This is a program that's currently a sub-major within a larger major, so all the resources are already in place. The student pipeline is in place. The students who are graduating now with this as a sub-major are going out and finding jobs. What we're doing is elevating this from a sub-major to a major with no new resources, because the courses will be the same, the faculty are all in place, to help students to be more clear to our prospective students out there in the public about this degree offering, and to give students the credential that really reflects the work that they've undertaken as they move into the workforce.
Right.
Can I ask this question? Then I understand that we are offering this major at Eau Claire, La Crosse, Oshkosh, and Stevens Point. How many graduates do we have at those institutions in this major?
I don't have that information, and I don't see the person who did the workup on this in the room. But I will tell you that we know that this is a growing field. It's one that is in high demand, and it is already in existence at UW Milwaukee. We're just changing the way the level.
So we don't have to spend any more money?
We do not have to spend any more money. If this is really, if anything, it's a marketing move.
Right.
That $400,000 is in effect what they're spending now, as I understand that.
Right.
It's a little confusing the way it was.
Right. We have to approve majors, and so that's why it's here.
Right. As a marketing tool.
Well, Colleen eloquently said, why don't you say what you said yesterday?
So you see, one aspect of this is the change in focus of the major away. I mean, the classes are in place, but this is a better articulation of a market demand, so that students who are going out into the workplace now that may have needed a different title degree with a specialization underneath that title are now needing an actual degree. They're needing their degree to be titled in that specific way, and I think it's helping our students go out and market themselves.
And just as importantly, it's helping students who are, prospective students who are making the decision about where to go to college to know that we have this program, because other places are calling it a bachelor's degree in athletic training, and at UW Milwaukee currently we are not able to do that. Here is Jan Shepard, who worked on this and may be able to answer your question about other degree programs.
Jen, want to go to the mic so people out there can hear? Thank you.
And the question was that our other campuses that already have the bachelor's, roughly how many students are enrolled in that program, degree program?
I'd have to look one more time to get the actual numbers. What I do know is that UW-Milwaukee did check with the other institutions. All of the institutions are at capacity. So it is not that there is space in any of those programs. I'd have to look at my data here to give you the exact numbers. I don't think the numbers are hugely higher than they are at any of at UW-Milwaukee's program. I think that's a pretty typical number. Because of the accreditation requirements, they need to have a certain number of faculty for a certain number of students. So to grow the program too much bigger requires there to be many more faculty. What we did look into was the capacity issues, and it was clear that at these other institutions around the state, they are all at capacity. Also, in terms of the national data, we looked at the national workforce development data, and it said that the projected expansion in this field was 12 to 20%.
Thank you. Yes, Regent Vasquez.
My interpretation of everything that I'm hearing is that the dollar amounts that are included here are not, in a sense, a request of new above and beyond dollars.
Right.
Just a calculation of what's already happening and what it costs, but it's not as if UW-Milwaukee is saying, by the way, we now need an additional $400,000.
That's right. That's correct.
That's correct.
Regent Spector?
A related point that really, I suppose I should say the committee, but as long as we're here, I think Jeff's question raises what we talked about yesterday, which is this duplication. One of our roles is to try to make sure there isn't duplication. And yet it's very difficult for us to draw the line on when, even when there are other programs. We talked about access yesterday. We talked about availability for people in the Milwaukee area for a program instead of having to go to La Crosse or Eau Claire.
Right.
I think it would be useful for our committee and to bring back to the full board and with the staff certainly to have some criteria for what duplication really means. I find it hard to make that judgment, and I think if we talked about more in the abstract as to what criteria we would look to instead of any one specific situation, maybe it would help us make decisions that were more reasoned.
We actually love criteria, as you know. So we would welcome some more for this topic. No, I mean, and I'm joking, but it's really serious. We talk about that too. That criteria has been very, very helpful to making decisions that we're supposed to make. So I welcome that.
Thank you.
I think part of the way to frame the conversation with the inspector is to say what's unnecessary duplication. I think we might have an argument there.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Right. Good point.
Right.
Right.
You know, just a personal note on this particular degree. I was speaking with the owner of, I think there are 4 or 5 exercise equipment retail stores around the state. And his number one requirement for hiring people to sell those machines is that they have at least this bachelor's degree. And he said, and 10 years from now, the second requirement will be that they not only have this bachelor's or master's degree, but they also speak Spanish. And that's just part of our evolving.
Where we're going.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that he didn't say, and they will need a doctorate.
But to answer the level of inquiry from Regent Loftus, he would need a doctorate. Any other questions of Regent Davis? Does that conclude your report?
Well, we have to vote on that. We have a motion and a second already out here. We have a motion and a second. Yeah.
Any other discussion? I'm sorry. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
And that
motion passes.
concludes my report, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
And now I'll call upon Regent Smith to present the report of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee.
Thank you, President Bradley, and Mike and Olivia and Eileen had a full agenda yesterday to go over, and I'll try to move through it fairly quickly. We first heard about the 2008 annual financial report and auditor's opinion. Ginger Hins, who is our Director of Financial Reporting, gave some highlights from that annual financial report that you have. This was sent to you. Then we heard for the second year from, now that she's appeared, State Auditor Jan Mueller presented the auditor's unqualified opinion and noted that there are enhanced auditing standards that are required to be followed. LAB Audit Director Carolyn Stittleberg, who has worked with us throughout on this report, outlined two areas of concern over internal controls. Both were not considered to be material weaknesses, but they are significant deficiencies. The committee asked for additional information about the risk being accepted surrounding computer change controls. That had to do with the access and ability to change financial information. And there's going to be a report back at the March meeting on that. And the second weakness related to business resumption planning. And LAB acknowledged some progress in that area, but an ongoing concern that we didn't have enough business resumption plan specifics in line, not only throughout our system. So we're going to hear more about those, but specifically on the computer access issue in March. That complete report is online. We next heard about the 2009 review and audit plan from Julie Gordon first. I think you have that in your materials as to what audits are planned for the coming year. And then we heard from Paul Raisky, a very good presentation from UW-Milwaukee, Director of Internal Audit, who spoke about how the campus develops its own internal audit plan. Very, very interesting. We then had a discussion on one of our favorite topics, differential tuition. Rita Harris presented an overview first of existing differential tuition levels for UW-Milwaukee, UW-Oshkosh, and UW-Platteville. Provost Cheng from UW-Milwaukee requested modifications and talked to the per-credit differential tuitions at the Peck School of the Arts, the College of Engineering and Applied Science, Sheldon Lubar School of Business Administration, and the College of Nursing. Two students joined us and gave presentations. They represent what's called the Black and Gold Committee at UW-Milwaukee, and in the School of Business and the College of Nursing, spoke about the importance of differential tuition to their instruction. And we had a lengthy discussion about the increasing nature of these requests and concluded with regard to UW-Milwaukee to revise the resolution to limit the increases to no more than 3% per year for fall 2009 through fall 2012, except for engineering, which may not exceed 4% per year for fall 2009 through fall 2012. We also discussed establishing principles, maybe criteria, to improve and standardize the differential tuition rate setting process. So on behalf of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, I move now the adoption of Resolution 12C1 as revised.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the resolution, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Second differential tuition request came from UW-Oshkosh. We heard that presentation from Petra Loader, who's the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. She presented information requested the committee to approve a resolution establishing an annual 3% increase in the institution's differential tuition, which supports the UW-Oshkosh's personal development compact. This program and its funding approach have been supported by the students at that institution, and the rate has not been changed since fall of 2004. So the committee amended the resolution to approve the annual increases for fall 2009 through fall 2012. And on behalf of the committee, I move adoption of Resolution 12C2 as revised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Finally, on the differential tuition, we heard from UW-Platteville Assistant Chancellor Rob Kramer, and he had requested adoption of Resolution 12C3, which would approve the continuation of the regional enrollment differential tuition program at Platteville, an increase in the non-resident tuition differential premium from $4,000 per year to $4,400 per year beginning the fall of 2010. It's actually a very good report from Rob, and obviously this has been a very successful program at Platteville. With the number of students in it now, close to almost 1,000 students in that program, and it's exactly what we set out to do when we approved it. The resolution also approves an allowable annual increase to the regional enrollment differential premium beginning the fall of 2011 and may not exceed the dollar amount of resident undergraduate tuition at UW-Platteville. That resolution will be included in the consent agenda at the end of our report. Then we went on to talk about trust fund issues. And heard from Director on that, Director of Trust Funds, and this was the highlight of the 2008 Annual Trust Fund Report. And these numbers that he gave us first were as of June 30th, 2008, and that's important to keep in mind that date as to when these numbers were came about. The fund held in assets totaled $430 million, down from $443 million at the end of the prior fiscal year. Gifts were down from $16.5 million to $11.6. Disbursements benefiting UW institutions was down $22 million to around $20 million. At least as of June 30th, our long-term fund, which is used for endowed assets and makes up the bulk of our total assets, returned a negative 2.7 over that period compared to a benchmark of 6.8. The intermediate fund and income fund, which are generally more conservative, shorter term, returned 7.6 and 4%. Investment fees incurred by the fund were competitive at 0.68, and the annual administrative fees were 0.11 of the value of the total assets. We'll get back to a little bit of the subject that Kevin talked about earlier later, but that was as of a report as of June of 2008. We then reviewed the request for an exception to the Regent policy on quasi-endowments regarding the Mildred Stolberg request. The committee was asked to approve a resolution allowing expenditure of principal and income from the Mildred Stolberg request to be made available for spending related to the construction of the Chazen Museum addition. The Chancellor and Museum Director feel the donor intended the money to be used in the best interest of the museum. The museum's highest priority is the $42.5 million expansion of the museum. Release of this funding will allow the institution to proceed to the bidding phase of this particular project. Tom Henderson gave a presentation regarding our technology report and system information. It's presented a IT plan entitled the Common Systems Roadmap. Each campus has developed its own strategic IT plan, which contains 9 strategic objectives. None of the campus projects exceed $1 million. In accordance with the legislation that was passed in 2007, the board is to receive these plans by March 1st of each year. Tom also presented progress reports on the 5 major IT projects that are ongoing, those over $1 million. That, again, report is required by state statute. These projects include the student information systems at UW-Eau Claire, UW La Crosse, and UW Stout, the identity and access project management project, and one, of course, that has drawn a lot of attention in recent years, of course, the human resources planning project. Just as an aside, I think Tom reported, and Kevin maybe can confirm that this is hoping to be up and going by this year.
The planning project will be complete in this summer, and then move forward from there. The action will be coming back to the board at that time.
Correct. So that, I think an important point to understand is, as Tom's saying, we'll get sometime later in the summer to the end of the planning process, then we'll bring it back to this board and we'll have a big decision about going forward with the full implementation of the project at that time.
Then we heard from Larry Rubin, and I think Larry gave a similar report to your group, Danae, on campus safety training and mental health. No, we understood he was at your committee first.
He was at our committee, but
he didn't give that report. Well, then I will.
You can. Please.
All campuses now have campus-wide threat assessment teams in place, and 2 system-wide threat assessment training schools have each drawn over 100 campus participants, and the 3rd has been scheduled. On mental health, which I know attracted a lot of attention and concern of this board when the audit report was given, a system-wide committee on mental health has been formed and held its first meeting in December. They'll be reviewing the basic health module policy of the board, recommending suggested changes to the policies, conducting the bulk of their work the early part of this year, and report back to us in May or June. We heard on fall 2008 enrollment from Sharon Wilhelm, very quick but interesting report that told us that we are now at a new record enrollment of 175,000 head count, which is up over 1,600 from last year. Sharon's presentation is in your folders. Highlights include new freshmen are slightly down, WTCS transfers are at an all-time high, and non-residents again, a subject that we've talked a lot about at this board, are on the rebound. And that report in the slide is in your folders. Finally, Debbie Durkin presented a schedule of UW system expenditures for the first half of the fiscal year, as well as data regarding gifts, grants, and contracts for the second quarter, and that's in your materials. We passed a policy on identity theft detection, prevention, and mitigation. We heard from Chris Ashley, who's senior legal counsel, on this subject. This policy is required under federal law, which requires financial institutions and creditors holding covered accounts to implement an identity theft protection program that includes detection of red flags that may signal identity theft. Colleges and universities are considered creditors under this new law, and boards are required to adopt these policies. We had as Danae reported, we also had a similar report on textbooks, and very similar, and we'll be back in May with the joint meeting on that subject. So for our consent agenda, I would ask and move on behalf of the committee to adopt Resolution 12C3, which is the UW Platteville Regional Enrollment Differential Tuition Program, Resolution 12D2, the request for principal expenditure of UW System Trust Funds, the Lizard Stolberg request, and Resolution 12G4, the policy on identity theft detection, prevention, and mitigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any request to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Just real quickly, again, we did in closed session, which President Riley reported on earlier, we heard a rather sobering report, of course, as Kevin has reported, on the impact of the economy on our trust funds, which are, of course, our endowment funds. Although the board investment policy requires us to look at what we call underwater accounts in June of each year, we are also provided the opportunity to do so at an earlier date if we think the economy requires that. And of course, we did yesterday. As of 12/31/08, there were about 23, I think we may have had 30, but at least the numbers I've got is 23, endowment accounts whose fair market value was less than its historical cost. In addition, 23 accounts that the board had designated as endowments were underwater. We knew about the negative impact. The committee fellow we knew this would have a negative impact on departmental funding and scholarship. As Kevin indicated, committee fellow was prudent to stop earning distributions on these accounts that were 5% or greater beneath their historical cost value. That concludes my report.
Can I ask a question? First of all, I apologize for being late, but I was at a foundation meeting going over this stuff on another matter. And it's probably the third meeting I've been to about these issues. And my question, and I couldn't make it yesterday, when you were looking at the endowments and things being underwater, what was the treatment of the private equity? Did they report on the mark-to-market? Because you've got a report there in June.
I think you'd have to have Doug Hurd.
Yeah, Doug did Hurd.
But how did they report out the private equity portion? Did they tell you that they had marked the market, or you've got a 6-month? Plus, we've just gone through the worst 6 months in the history of private equity, and I just wonder if we ought to take a look at that, because if you think some are underwater, I don't know what the impact of that is. It's been devastating in every foundation report I've seen in the last month.
Let me ask Doug that. Can we get that information from Doug?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll get that to you.
All right. Thank you.
Brent, I have a question. I don't know if you or some member of the staff. We reduced our out-of-state tuition, and one of the reasons we did that was because the campuses were telling us that the out-of-state enrollment had decreased. We had gotten too price-sensitive, and we reduced that tuition in order to essentially create more profit, if you will, or more resources available from those students to educate more Wisconsin students. Other than just pointing to the fact that those out-of-state enrollments are up, is there any evidence, even anecdotal evidence, that students are saying that they recognize that and that's why they're
I asked that question yesterday to Sharon. I think the response was in the affirmative that was, at least anecdotally, that was a factor in why we were seeing that uptick. So I think what we tried to do with that policy has worked.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions of Brent?
That's it.
Who's
Thank you.
report?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any additional resolutions that anyone would like to offer? Mike?
Anyone offer a resolution, or can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Actually, I had two comments. One, I thought Regent Falbo was too modest in his talk about Italian-American athletes, because he neglected to mention one that I'm sure Hurley Rosary Society honored Alan Amici, who was a Kenosha native, and 50th anniversary of the game that he scored the...
Two.
Thank you.
The other thing is more pertinent. As all of you read, and Judy will add to this, I'm sure, Judy and David and I were at the high school board meeting on Wednesday. And separate from the merits and the substance of it, I wanted to tell you what a terrific job David, who's the chair of the board, but also represents us, at least spiritual, as a member of our board, did in this situation. Not only in organizing the meeting and how it was held and how the agenda was brought forward, but more importantly in how he, as chair of the meeting, dealt with the speakers in a most difficult situation. He just did an outstanding job of letting people speak, of questioning them, of leading us to do it in a fair way, of summarizing where we've been. I was really proud of him and what he did in that very difficult situation. And one last point, and I'll stop. I also think you should be aware of what a good job the university police did. They had a significant presence there, leading the Middleton police and themselves in substantial numbers of people. I don't know, 50 police officers maybe. And they are so well trained, and their dealings with the general public, I was watching them, including the people who were opposed to what was being proposed, were just outstanding. And I think they should be commended. This UW-Madison police people were terrific.
Chancellor Martin, perhaps you could pass that on to the staff. Good. Regent Crane?
I just want to second the comments that were made by my inspector. It was a privilege to be at that meeting, and that was largely due to the leadership that was there. And in addition to what Mike has said about enabling all those who were there, the way he handled the meeting also enabled us to do, the board members, to do, he treated us all with respect and gave us the opportunity to work with. That was great.
Well, good. Thank you very much for those comments, and David, thanks for your leadership. That was a very difficult task. We appreciate it, obviously. Any communications, petitions, and memorials? Oh, I'm sorry.
On that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. You got one? I had one, too. Go ahead. Okay. Maybe we have the same one.
Two. Last night, I attended the event to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the La Follette School of Public Policy. A grand celebration. Their star pupil now is Colleen. And their newest faculty member is John Wiley. So that is one. What a success story that La Follette School has turned out to be. Second, I didn't say anything about Bert McNamara before. I don't know much about Bert as a regent. But Bert was, I knew him well. He was active at the time when we had strong, tough union leaders in the state that led big unions This is the era of Johnny Schmidt with the AFL-CIO and Ray Majerus at UAW, and this is the time when the Teamsters were tough and the brewery workers were a force. But it was also the time that the Democrats went to war with their most important political partners, in other words, the unions. And to give you an example, we sought to stop freeway construction in Milwaukee. You can imagine what the steel workers, the Teamsters, the UAW, and the AFL thought of that idea. That was just one of the things. The person during this time that held things together, helped us, was Burt McNamara. Quite a guy, and really I think a historic figure. On a personal note, his son-in-law was the chairman of my campaign for governor. You all remember when I was a governor.
I voted for
It was a period now referred to as similar to Athens in the age of Pericles. But just to give you an idea what a Renaissance man Burt McNamara was, and what a great person.
Good. Thank you very much, Regent Loftus. Regent Pruitt.
I just wanted to, Mr. President, note that on January 1st, 2009, Senator Claiborne Pell died at the age of 92. I had met him a couple of times, but did not know him well. But he struck me as this patrician legislator who at the same time understood in some intuitive way the struggles facing low and middle income families and students trying to go to college. And the Pell Grants are his legacy. And there are literally millions of students across this country and thousands in Wisconsin who were able to afford to attend college because of the Pell Grants. And I thought, particularly at this moment in the country's future, it might be a good time to at least acknowledge his passing and recognize his extraordinary contribution to higher education.
Thank you very much, Regent Pruitt. Anyone else on communications, petitions, and memorials, or any unfinished or additional business? If not, we'll take a 10-minute recess, and then we will resume for going to closed session. Thank you.